Hey guys, so another fun little Q&A where people have asked us about commands and what kind of commands we use with our dogs. Well, the main commands that we use when we're out and about with our dogs. And there's always going to be variables with this one as well, but one of the most poignant ones, I guess, is obviously having a reliable recall. So the word come and what our expectations of that is as well. I know if I say come, I want my dog to stop what they're doing immediately and come straight back. It's a really important one, no matter what's going on, whether it's recalling from other people, other dogs, roos, snakes, you name it. Being able to recall my dog with that kind of certainty straight away is paramount for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Having that bulletproof recall, as we call it. You call it the $10,000 bet, right? So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I've always sat there and said it's a $10,000 bet. And in the dog training world, there always used to be, people would say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely is your dog to come back? And people would just randomly pull out numbers. And if you know anything about, psychology, 7 is the most common number that people will pull out.
So on that, one of the things I do is if I ever use a 1 to 10 scale, I'll always sit there and say, all right, on a scale of 1 to 10, but you're not allowed to use 7. So I always do that. So now you got to choose.
Yeah. And I used to say to people, it's like, so, okay, would you bet me $7,000? And they go, oh God, no. And I'm like, just to myself, I'm sitting there thinking, if people will say 7 out of 10 is how likely your dog is going to recall, but you're not going to bet me $7,000, I thought, cool, now here's a better analogy or a stronger analogy that I can use with people. So, when I'm asking about reliability with their dogs, and also when I speak about reliability, with my own dogs, where is my scale at? And it's not about the value exchange. By all means, if you want to pay me $7,000, then that's cool. But what it is like, how much are you willing to bet me that your dog's going to come back? And some people say, I'm not going to bet you anything. I'm like, would you bet me 50 cents? And they go, oh yeah, okay, 50 cents. I'm like, well, that's awesome, because at least we're playing now. Like we're placing a bet. And I think it quite often starts off 50 cents to $1, $10, $20, $25, etc., etc. And again, it's just like, well, where is your confidence level? And I know...
explain the concept behind it. So it's kind of along the lines of, some people let their dog off lead and were like, hey, would you give us $2,000 if your dog doesn't come back? And they're like, well, no. Like, so it's almost like, so that's the value of your dog. Like,
it's the confidence level.
Yeah.
And like we all love our dogs so much, and touch wood that it never happens, but if your dog was to be injured or hit by a car or bitten by a snake or anything horrible like that, the bills can very quickly get up to $10,000. I'm like, well, are you going to bet that? Because that's the ballpark in which I want to play with my dog. I want to have that confidence. And I know last year Mr. Smith was roughly 9 or 10 months, and we went camping, and Brent turned around and said, oh, why don't you let him off lead? I'm like, I'm not putting $10,000 on the table yet. And the irony was, it didn't take long after that, and another beautiful couple rocked up with their German Shepherd, and they wanted to play and say hello, and I'm like, no, like, dude, you can't, just because you see another dog or you see somebody else doesn't give you, as much as I love you, doesn't give you the right to run up and say hello and be friends. So it's quite interesting. And of course, your environment will change how much you're going to bet.
That's right.
So there's, speaking of last year, there were times that I would have Mr. Smith off lead, because the area was more, cohesive to a higher bet. So it depends on where we are, how much I would sit there, and
less distractions and less going on. So in a boring environment, it was very easy for him to start to come back to us when we called him. Whereas in a more distracted environment, then there was less likely for him to come back. So those are the environments that we wanted to start to train him in, which we got the ability to do. So now as he gets a little bit older and he's had more and more training in these different scenarios, then he's more likely to come back more often. We've gone from perhaps 10% of the time him being off lead, to now it's almost like 90% of the time where he's off lead. So
yeah,
which is really
and
nice.
I think for me, I want to have that reliability, and there's a huge difference between having I call it the Baywatch dream, where everyone wants to see their dogs just running and having fun and that freedom and whatnot, but like, where's the reality of it? And every dog is different. My previous dog, I pretty much could have off lead from the get-go,
and the same as we can with Puppy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But Mr. Smith, it's just a different kettle of fish, and I don't hold anything against him for it. It's just purely the fact of when he is ready, I'll give him that level of freedom, because with freedom comes responsibility, and I want to keep him safe always. It doesn't mean he misses out on anything, so gradually building a reliable recall where I will sit there and go, yep, I'll bet you 10 grand, and it's not about the monetary exchange, it's the confidence I have in my dog's ability to know what he's doing.
Yep. The other command that we use often is here or over here, and when we say command, we have formal commands and we have informal commands. So the word here or back here just means, hey, you've gone a little bit too far, just head back towards us. There's nothing formal about it. We still want you to do it. We might repeat it a couple of times. Hey, buddy, back here. Hey, back here. Something like that. So it's not a formal command, but it is giving the dog a direction that, hey, come back this way, like you're a little bit too far away. Or we set up visual perimeters at our camp spots, don't we? So, they're not allowed past, the tree that's over there. So
or
if
a hill,
so if they start to walk past, we're like, back here, mate. And then we encourage the dogs to come back. So having something informal like here or over here or back here, that works really well for us. So that's another command that we do use.
And I think like what that looks like is, if our dogs are off sniffing all the amazing trees that are around, and there's just like tree after tree after tree after tree, and they're moving away, we can just sit there and say, hey, back here. So come back tree after tree after tree, kind of heading back. And I think, as you were just talking about as well, with those visual parameters, it doesn't have to be anything super duper formal. So there are trees, we've used hills, we've used tracks, or even like behind us, you might be able to see the little creek here. Like, our dogs are allowed on our side of the creek, they're not allowed on the other side of the creek. So, and it doesn't take long if we're consistent with it, and it's not that they're in trouble, it's just like, back here. So if they're constantly being, reminded just to come back this way, they don't push those parameters anymore.
Yeah, there's a lot of freedom with what we give them without having to go to the other side, isn't there?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely another one. One of the other ones that we use quite often is the command drop. So we use the word drop as more of a cut, like especially when we're camping, more of a cutout switch.
It's a drop, down, or plus is the words that most commonly are used.
Yeah. So all we want our dogs to do is just lie down. So we kind of look for that Sphinx position, but again, we're camping, so all I want my dog to do is stop what they're doing and lie down. And then we can use that in a variety of different ways. So a little while ago, we were out walking our dogs, they were on lead. This is when we had Zuka, and we practiced these types of things. So it's not like when we go camping, the first time that the dog hears drop isn't the first time that we need them to do it. We'll practice it, and so when they hear a command, whether it's a recall or whether it's drop or whatever it might be, we've already practiced this a bunch of times.
The conditioning's really good for the dog.
Yeah, and I was about to turn around to Kat and just say, hey, just so you know, I'm just going to do our drop command, like our emergency drop, just as practice. And I was kind of opening my mouth to say it. And about 15 meters or 10 meters or so in front of us, the dogs were on lead and they were with us. And I was just about to say that, and I kind of opened my mouth, and as I opened my mouth, a snake, snuck across. He didn't walk, slithered across the track in front of us. And so it was, straight away, both of us kind of said drop at the same time, and both dogs just went down into their position. And that's that cutout switch. I mean, that's one of the reasons that we will use it. If something unwanted runs into our campsite, we can tell them to drop, we can go over and we can leash them up, or whatever it might be. So as I say, in this moment, both dogs were on lead, and it was drop, and then we could just stand in front of the dogs. The snake was a beautiful, I think we decided it was a copperhead.
Yeah, copperhead. Well,
yeah.
We spoke to a couple of other people. And,
so, you know, we think it was a copperhead. And it was absolutely stunning. It just kind of slithered off into the bush and, you know, didn't annoy us, and we didn't annoy it.
Yeah.
So that was really nice. So that's one of the ways that we will use our drop command. And the other one that we use
I was just going to say on that, darling, because you did say emergency drop. I want to be really clear. There are some people that have what they call an emergency command versus a standard command. So they might have, you know, a drop, and then their emergency one, they give it a different name, you know. For me, and from my perspective, is if I'm going to give my dog a command, I want the dog to have strong enough conditioning that, you know, they feel good about it, but also that they're going to do it reliably, and that is what ties back into that 10K back. I don't want to have a wishy-washy command where it's like, hey, you know, like, you can drop or plats some of the time, like every single time, baby, I want you to do this. And I think that's a really important thing to kind of appreciate, that I love the romanticism, the ideology of having something that's done in an emergency. But if you need your dog to come, if you need them to plats or drop or down, whatever your command is, you need them to do it right then and there. So we want to make sure that the dog's emotional response to it is always positive, where they feel empowered when they're doing it. Because to me, what, and this is just my own personal opinion, if you have an emergency command and then this,
sometimes command,
I don't know even what you would call this, like 50-50 command, if the emergency command has that elicitation of beautiful, you know, dopamine, serotonin, like all the endorphins are kicking in, what's this one doing? It's going to become extinct. So we do train. I do want to make that huge difference. When we sit there and say an emergency drop, it was just, you know, Brent was communicating to me that he's going to give a command with a sense of urgency, as though it was an emergency, opposed to, oh, we're going to use our special, you know, roast chicken command kind of thing. It's just, you know, you want your dogs to have that visceral response all the time when you give them a command.
Yeah, so it's a really good pickup from you, actually. So what I mean when we talk about the emergency drop, I can walk along with Puppy, for instance, and just go drop, and she's just going to do that, right? Like that's, you know, we've done it a whole bunch of times and she understands it. The emergency drop mindset comes in when things go bad, and then all of a sudden I don't have that really calm drop. It's like, oh no, so like the leader's broken, or there's a dog rushing out, or there's a snake, you know, on the path. So my voice changes. So it was going to be, you know, drop, with more arousal, I suppose would be the word, not excitement, but arousal. So as opposed to drop, it's like drop, like when you kind of, when things have gone bad, and you're a bit panicky. So I also want my dog to hear, you know, even a change in my command, because that will happen at time to time, you know, when things do go bad, and they do, that, you know, you still need to listen to that tone and that command, even though it sounds a little bit different to what it might look like on an obedience field. So yeah, that's our emergency drop, where we just kind of get the dog to do it.
That's a recall, a relaxed recall, which we say the word here, like come here. We've got drop, plats, or down, depending on what your command is.
Whatever your command is,
And I think the next one for me is in the ute. So we drive a dual cab ute with a canopy, and, you know, in the car, you know, whatever. But just to sit there and be able to give our dogs what we call a send away, because we're sending our dogs away from where we are. So if we're seated, that's good English. If we're seated here, and, you know, for whatever reason we saw some, you know, other hikers walk through or whatever, we just want to make sure that our dogs, you know, we always want to advocate for them. So we might just say in the ute. So having our dogs understand that they can move away from us and get into the ute. And I think a similar command would be, you know, on your bed, you know, in the camper, in the tent,
whatever it might be,
inside. It's the same type of thing, but it's being able to send your dog away from where you are reliably, and that they know not to get out until we give them a release cue.
Yeah, for those of you that have been down to our group classes or anything like that, and you've seen me when I get Puppy out, and I'll do a demo with her, and then I send her back to the ute from the other side, from 100 meters away, and she runs past, 70 people and 70 dogs, and she doesn't go and visit them, and that's the sort of thing that we're talking about, where it is very, very, it's really, really clear. Like, we sit there and say in the ute, and she will stop whatever it is that she's doing, and she'll run to the ute. The same thing at the moment, as we say with Mr. Smith. He's a younger dog, and he's learning the skill. So at the moment, our expectation is that he heads towards the ute and he puts his front feet up on it, on the tailgate. Like, that's the expectation. Maybe someday when he can, we'll get him to jump up into it, but it's the same kind of thing, like, just go to the position and hang out there. So Puppy's very good. She jumps in the back, and then Mr. Smith is also just learning, when we say in the ute, that he runs along and just puts his front feet up onto the tailgate of the ute, and we just lift him up. But at the stage, it's perfect for him. It doesn't matter if he jumps in, he knows to start to go to that position.
I think at the end of the day too, like, even if you had a 4-wheel drive and you had a, let's just say for extremes, a Chihuahua that clearly may not be able to make that, that height deficit, if you would. It's that thing of, is your dog reliable? If you were to sit there and say to your little Chihuahua, like in the ute, is it predictable that it's going to go all the way to the door or to the back of the ute, or to the the vehicle in any which way that it can? It doesn't necessarily mean it has to get all the way, but like for me, again, you want that reliability, that the dog knows what to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think in the ute's a very important one, and then the other one, perhaps the last one, we might come up with a couple of others, but one of the ones that we find, especially when we get to a campground and the dogs go off and explore the area. So we get to a campground, the dogs stay in the ute, Kat and I will get out, we'll sort of walk around the camp area and have a bit of a look before we get the dogs out. But the other command that we use is the word out or the word give. So whatever, for instance, if the dogs have something in their mouth, whatever the command is for them to spit it out, we use that command, because that's really important. For instance, the campsite that we've been at, over the last few days, there have been people here with dogs before, and there are a whole bunch of little bones that were left by, the people and the dogs. That happens. So when our dogs find those little bones, whether it's a lamb chop bone that's been half cooked on the fire or another dog's bone that's been left around, we want our dogs to, give or out on command. So that's also a really good one, isn't it?
Yeah, sorry, just turning the veggies.
So for me, when I say give, whatever your word is, give or out, whatever's in your mouth, we want you to spit it out.
And I think that, again, the really important thing is to have your dog want to do that. Not sit there and feel that you're going to take something from them. Like, I've always sat there and called the out command or the give command confession. You want your dog to say, look what I've got. I want my dog to feel comfortable coming to me and showing me what he's always got. And if we're always taking things from our dogs, he's going to feel emotionally in deficit. You don't want to be the tax man to your dog. You want to be the point of opportunity. But yeah, so the give or the out command, where your dog feels comfortable to bring you something, spit it out, give it to you. Because if it is something that is toxic, if it is something, be it at a campsite or even in and around the home, if they've come across some poisons or something like that, you'd rather your dog bring it to you opposed to run and hide.
Yeah.
And I think the other command that we use very often and frequently is our release command. So we don't say the word stay to our dogs. The tricky thing with that, it starts to, I always sit there and say, it turns you into a really creepy person, right? When you start to say stay, because you start doing stay, and you creep away a little bit more, stay. And I'm like, apart from the fact that it's quite funny because, we have both done that previously. Yeah. We didn't know any different. But when we give our dogs a command, it implies that they are to stay in that position until they hear their release word. So the most common release word is the word free. And where we use it a lot, we've already kind of touched on it. When we say in the ute, you stay in your ute until you are released. So if we're saying in the ute, you stay there until you hear the word free. And comes in handy also. Excuse me. Comes in handy also when our dogs are in the camper. And Brent said so before. Like quite often, I'll get out and I just want to make sure nothing's come into camp overnight that I don't necessarily want my dog interacting with. So, as I either unzip a tent or step down the stairs of a camper, whatever it is, I don't want my dog to barge through and just assume, yeah, cool, I can go, exploring. I want to get out and just have a quick little scan and make sure things are cool. So, in our current camper, they know not to do that until they hear the word free, and then it's all up to
Yeah, absolutely.
And free doesn't mean, hey, you can go and do whatever you want. Free still has that. There's a level of expectations that we have with our dogs. So again, the parameters are still in play. There are still components, that are really important that they listen to. But it's, I guess it's like going for a Sunday drive. You can kind of go wherever you want, but you still got to apply to the main rules.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think a beautiful example of this, you guys have probably watched me just kind of constantly look over the back of Brent here, because Mr. Smith is just over there chewing on a bone and enjoying himself, and he's off lead and he's currently free, but he definitely knows that this is the space that we want him to hang out. You may have heard me whistle out just prior, earlier in the video, because he just started to wander just a little bit far. He stopped, turned around, laid back down, so it was all cool.
So they're the main commands that we use, and then the expectations that we put around our dogs. So obviously the recall, so a formal command where whatever it is, stop what you're doing and come back to us. Our informal recall, so back here, whatever it might be, where the dog just turns around and comes, just comes back towards us. It's, if they go from 15 meters back to 10, then we're like, hey, good job, buddy, and then they might turn around and walk off again, so they don't have to run all the way back.
It's almost like saying this way.
Yeah. The drop command, which we have spoken about, in the ute or on their bed, whatever that one might be, but making that very, very specific so the dogs understand it.
The give and the out.
Give and the out, and then the the release word, the termination cue of, hey, what you just did, we really like it. Thanks for doing it. And now you can come out and you can go for a swim, or you can walk around camp, or you can come out of that drop position, or you can finish a recall position, or whatever it might be. So those are the main ones that we use when we're out and about camping. There are obviously other obedience commands that our dogs know, but when we're camping we don't generally use them. So these are camping related, obviously. So that's where we go.
Let us know, what commands do you use most frequently with your dogs? Like, it'd be really interesting, like everybody has their own little rules and their expectation and what each command means. So we'd love to hear it. Pop it down in the comments down below. As they say, if you could give us a like, subscribe, and hit the little bell notification, that would be awesome. And if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. And
and if you liked it, share, and if you didn't like it, share as well. So. With something that you liked. All right. Thanks, guys.